The late afternoon sun was a silent, oppressive force, baking the asphalt of Cedar Falls' quiet main road. The air above it quivered like a mirage, turning the world into a shimmering, indistinct haze. Most residents had already surrendered to the indoors, their air conditioners humming a low, mechanical symphony behind closed blinds. That's why the sight of a lone black sedan rolling steadily down Maple Avenue caught the eye of Officer Mark Lom. From his cruiser, parked in the deep shadow of the old feed store, Lom's jaw tightened. The driver, a black woman in her early 30s, her hair pulled into a neat, professional bun, a crisp white blouse, and black slacks, didn't look like she belonged here. Not to him. Not in a town where people like her were only seen pushing carts at the supermarket or mopping the diner floor after hours. He flicked on his dash cam, not out of any obligation of protocol, but because he knew the video would be his record, his way of shaping the story. With a quick tap of the switch, his cruiser's lights exploded red and blue against the empty street. Inside the sedan, Jordan Hayes saw the reflection flare in her rear-view mirror. Her heartbeat didn't spike. Her hands remained steady on the wheel. She'd been expecting this, though perhaps not quite so soon. "Pull over right there." Lom's voice boomed from his loudspeaker as he approached, his hand already resting on the butt of his sidearm. Jordan rolled down her window halfway. "Officer, is there a problem?" Her tone was a calm, measured counterpoint to the heat and tension. "You match the description of a suspect in an ongoing investigation," he said flatly, his eyes darting past her shoulder to scan the interior. "Step out of the vehicle." She knew better than to argue on the street. But as she opened her door, she caught the subtle nod Lom shot to his partner, Officer Reed, who had just pulled up behind them. Moments later, a discovery was made. A small black duffel in the trunk, unzipped to reveal a handgun with its serial number filed off, a folded map marked with red circles, and a list of weapons written in block letters. Jordan stood in silence as Reed held it up like a trophy. She didn't flinch. Lom stepped closer, lowering his voice so the dash cam couldn't catch it. "Bad day for you, ma'am." Could have just been a traffic stop. Now the felony weapons charge. But as he began reciting her Miranda rights, something shifted. 3 blocks away, in a nondescript black SUV, a man in a baseball cap watched through binoculars. His finger hovered over a small transmitter. Then, with one firm press, a silent signal pulsed across a secure channel. 2 minutes later, a low rumble began to tremble through the hot air. Not from Lom's cruiser. Not from any car in Cedar Falls. This was heavier, closer. Jordan's eyes flicked toward the horizon. Lom noticed, but before he could follow her gaze, the faint glint of unmarked black vehicles crested the hill, their engines growling like a distant storm. He had no idea the storm was about to break right on top of him. Cedar Falls was the kind of place that looked harmless in postcards, with its brick storefronts, white steepled churches, and neatly trimmed lawns. But Jordan Hayes knew better. She had studied every file, every complaint, every buried report that painted a darker picture. Behind the quaint charm was a police department with a pattern. Racial profiling, wrongful arrests, and police misconduct swept quietly under the rug. Jordan's assignment from the Bureau wasn't just to look for evidence. She was here to collect the kind that would survive court. Hard proof of the civil rights violations the FBI suspected were tied to a weapons smuggling ring. And according to intelligence, Officer Mark Lom was a key player. 2 months undercover had taught her the town's rhythms. She'd learned which corners the beat cops liked to park on, who the department's protected locals were, and which names never made it into the incident reports. The deeper she went, the more she realized corruption wasn't just on the streets. It climbed right into the command structure. The problem was timing. The Bureau had given her another week to gather evidence before moving in. But now, with that stage gun in her trunk, the clock had been ripped off the wall and thrown in her face. Reed pretended to log the find into evidence, but kept the bag on the hood, his eyes cutting toward the security camera on the corner. Cedar Falls PD officers had a habit of blocking lenses with their bodies whenever things got questionable. Jordan noted it silently. Her body cam, hidden in the button of her blouse, had a perfect angle. "Going to take you downtown," Lom said, motioning her toward his cruiser. Jordan didn't resist. She slid into the back seat, the heavy door shutting out the street's empty quiet. Inside, the air was thick with the faint scent of old coffee and leather. She could hear the faint hiss of Lom's radio, officers chatting about a secure transfer to holding. Through the tinted glass, she caught a glimpse of a delivery truck turning onto Maple Avenue. The driver, a tall man in a baseball cap, didn't look her way, but she recognized him instantly. Special Agent John Mercer, her field contact. That meant the silent alarm she'd triggered earlier, pressing her left wrist against the underside of the trunk latch, had gone through. At the station, the routine was anything but. Jordan was walked past the booking area into a side corridor where an old wooden door led to interview room C. The camera's red recording light was off. Technical issue, Reed muttered when she glanced at it. Happens all the time. They sat her down. No cuffs. An illusion of civility. Lom tossed a thin folder onto the table. Inside were photos, grainy stills from a security feed of a woman with Jordan's build stepping out of a warehouse. The timestamp was from last night. Jordan knew exactly where she'd been last night, at a safe house with Mercer, logging evidence. The image was a composite, a cheap digital frame job. You want to explain this? Lom asked, leaning forward, his forearms planted like barricades. Jordan kept her breathing even. That's not me. That's your hair, your clothes, your car in the background. Then maybe my car took itself for a drive, she said coolly. The smirk that crossed Lom's face was the kind that came from knowing the system would back him no matter how thin the lie. What Lom didn't know was that every second of this was feeding into a live stream on a secure FBI server. Mercer was monitoring it from less than a mile away. The Bureau had been tracking not just Lom, but the entire chain of command above him. This arrest was about to become the match in a powder keg. But inside the room, Jordan had to play her part. She let the silence stretch, eyes locked on the table as if cornered. Reed finally spoke. You sign a statement. Plea to possession. And this stays small. You fight it, you're looking at years. Jordan's voice was quiet, almost weary. You want me to sign for something I didn't do? No, Lom said, smiling faintly. We want you to sign for something we found. By the time they decided to process her, dusk had begun to fall. Jordan was led out to the rear parking lot where a transport van waited. The streetlights flickered on, buzzing faintly. The town was still, too. Still. Then she heard it, a deep, rolling hum that didn't belong to any local traffic. Lom glanced toward the road, frowning. From the shadows, the same black SUV she'd seen earlier glided into view, headlights off until it was just yards away. Behind it, two more unmarked vehicles followed. Lom's hand went to his holster. Stay here, he barked at Reed, stepping forward. The SUV's headlights snapped on, blinding in the half-dark. Doors open in sync, boots hitting the asphalt in rapid succession. Men and women in plain clothes, but with the unmistakable bearing of law enforcement, fanned out. A glint of gold flashed at one of their belts. Jordan didn't smile. She simply straightened her posture, knowing the next few minutes would decide whether this entire operation would explode into the open or end in silence. The SUV doors slammed shut as the plainclothes officers fanned out, their movements crisp but deliberate. Lom kept one hand on his weapon, his other raised in what he probably thought looked like authority. This is a police operation, he barked. You're interfering. A man from the lead SUV stepped forward, flipping open a leather wallet. The flash of a badge was brief, but it was enough to make Reed's posture stiffen. FBI. Jordan kept her face neutral, but inside her pulse quickened. The Bureau had moved faster than she expected. Still, she knew they wouldn't blow their cover without cause. They needed Lom to hang himself in front of as many witnesses as possible. Lom tried to regain control. We got a suspect here. Weapons possession, maps, intel, you name it. Found it in her car. One of the FBI agents tilted his head, as if amused. In her car? That's interesting, considering her vehicle's been under federal surveillance for the past 8 weeks. A pause. The words hit like a weight. Lom's eyes narrowed, calculating his next move. Before Lom could respond, the FBI agents asked to speak to Jordan privately. Lom refused, claiming she was in custody under state jurisdiction. The tension was a live wire. The senior agent stepped closer to Lom and murmured something Jordan couldn't hear. But whatever it was made Lom's jaw clench. Moments later, Jordan was back in the station, this time in the main interview room. The FBI had requested to be present, but Lom insisted on leading the questioning himself, clearly hoping to reassert dominance. The camera in this room was working, or so it appeared. Jordan knew the Bureau's tech team had already patched into the feed, recording every second. "Tell me about the warehouse." Lom began. Jordan leaned back. "Why don't you tell me about it? You seem to know more than I do." He slammed a photo onto the table, the same doctored still from earlier. This time, though, there was a second photo, a grainy image of what looked like crates stamped with military codes. "You were there when these were moved," he accused. Jordan studied the photo. She recognized the crates. They'd been in FBI evidence storage until 2 weeks ago, which meant someone in Cedar Falls PD had inside access. She didn't let that show on her face. Outside the station, Mercer remained in his delivery truck disguise, eyes locked on the feed from Jordan's body cam. He was patched into the Bureau's mobile command center parked 2 streets over. "Confirmed. Those are stolen military crates," one analyst said in his earpiece. "And that's our link to the trafficking case in Houston. If that connection went public, it would implicate not just Lom, but several high-ranking officials who've been pretending Cedar Falls' crime problem was manageable." Mercer knew they had enough to move now, but he also knew the director wanted this airtight. They needed Lom to make one more mistake, something undeniable, as if on cue. The door to the interview room swung open. In walked Police Chief Randall Briggs, a thick-set man in his 50s with a politician's smile and a predator's eyes. "Mark, I'll take it from here," Briggs said, placing a fatherly hand on Lom's shoulder. Jordan immediately recognized him from the Bureau's target list. Briggs wasn't just suspected of protecting the gun operation. He was believed to be one of its primary beneficiaries. He turned to Jordan, his smile still in place. "Ms. Hayes, let's make this simple. We have overwhelming evidence against you, but I'm a reasonable man. You signed a statement cooperating with our investigation, and maybe this stays between us." "Between us?" Jordan asked. Briggs' smile widened, but his eyes hardened. "Trust me, it's better that way." Jordan didn't answer. She knew the Bureau agents in the parking lot were waiting for her signal. But Briggs leaned in, lowering his voice. "You think the FBI is going to protect you? They'll cut you loose the second you're not useful. Out here, I decide who walks free." Her gaze flicked briefly to the corner of the room where a tiny black dome housed a visible security camera. Then she glanced at her own blouse button, her hidden body cam. Briggs had just given her exactly what she needed, a direct admission that he was manipulating the system. "Let's go," Lom said impatiently, grabbing her arm. They marched her toward the transport van again. This time, the parking lot was darker and the hum of engines was closer. From the shadows, for black SUVs rolled in formation, boxing in the transport van. Their headlights cut through the gloom, pinning Lom and Briggs in a stark white light. Doors flew open, tactical gear, sidearms holstered but ready. Jackets with bold yellow FBI lettering were now visible in the light. "Mark Lom, Randall Briggs, you're under arrest for conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and possession of stolen military property," the lead agent announced. Gasps erupted from the few onlookers across the street. One local shop owner ducked out to see what the commotion was. Phone already raised to record. Briggs' smile vanished. Lom looked around like a man realizing the walls had been closing in for months without him noticing. Jordan stepped out from the van, now flanked by 2 federal agents. She didn't need to say anything, but she did. "Bad day for you, gentlemen," she said evenly. "Could have just been a traffic stop." The FBI agents moved in, cuffing Lom first. His badge and weapon were removed in full view of the crowd, camera phones catching every second. Briggs tried to protest, but when an agent handed him a federal warrant signed by a judge 3 states away, the fight drained out of him. The sound of those handcuffs clicking shut wasn't just the end of their careers. It was a collapse of the network they'd built for years. Under the blinding glare of the headlights, The arrest unfolded with surgical precision. Jordan stood between two federal agents, her blouse button camera still recording every movement, every syllable. For weeks, she had walked the razor's edge, collecting evidence on Cedar Falls PD's role in a stolen weapons pipeline. Tonight, that evidence was no longer hidden. It was streaming live to the FBI's Cyber Division, to the U.S. Attorney's Office, and most satisfyingly, to a secure database that Briggs and Lom could never touch. The twist was that this wasn't just about her innocence. It was about detonating the entire conspiracy in one move. The lead federal agent nodded toward her, giving her the floor. Jordan stepped forward, holding a small, nondescript device between her fingers. "This," she said, her voice steady and carrying the night air, "has every word you've said to me since you pulled me over. Every threat, every fabricated charge, every piece of planted evidence. And it's already backed up in 3 different places." Lom scoffed, trying to mask his unease, but Briggs's jaw tightened. Jordan didn't pause. "It also has video. Your little technical issue in the interrogation room? Not so technical when you know where the hidden lens is. That lens was ours. And it caught you admitting to obstructing justice, manipulating evidence, and protecting stolen U.S. military property." She let that sink in, her eyes sweeping over the small crowd now gathering at the edges of the parking lot, their phone cameras glowing. For a town used to whispered rumors about police misconduct and racial profiling, seeing exposed in real time was electric. The federal agent nearest her opened a slim briefcase, revealing printed warrants and a signed federal indictment. "This investigation," he announced, "has been active for 9 months. Our undercover FBI agent," he gestured to Jordan, "was placed here to document systemic abuse of power, wrongful arrest patterns, and direct ties to organized weapons trafficking." Briggs tried to speak, but Jordan cut him off, her voice slicing through the tension. "You thought you could frame me because I fit your profile. A black woman driving alone through your jurisdiction. You didn't know you were planting evidence in a federal vehicle under 24-hour surveillance. You didn't know the maps and the gun you so proudly found were tagged with microtransmitters the Bureau has been tracking for weeks." She stepped closer, just enough for him to feel the weight of her words. "You didn't know you were part of a civil rights investigation with your name at the top of the list." Around them, the crowd's murmurs swelled. The shop owner was live streaming. A teenager whispered, "She's FBI," with awe in his voice. Mercer emerged from the shadows now, no longer a delivery driver, but in his full bureau credentials. Walking straight to Jordan, he handed her a thin folder, photocopies of bank records, signed authorizations, and security logs linking both Lom and Briggs to offshore accounts. "The money trail," Mercer said simply. Jordan held it up. "Federal prosecutors will love this, and so will the press." Briggs's last vestige of bravado cracked. "You'll ruin this whole town," he growled. "No," Jordan replied. "I'll clean it." The federal team moved in, separating the suspects, reading them their charges: conspiracy, obstruction, possession of stolen military weapons, and multiple counts of civil rights violations. It was done with the efficiency of people who had rehearsed this moment in their minds for months. As Briggs was led to a waiting SUV, Jordan caught his "I won last time." "I told you," she said softly, "you'd regret pulling me over." The doors slammed, engines roared to life, and in the rear-view reflections of those black SUVs, the people of Cedar Falls saw something they hadn't in a long time: accountability arriving without warning and without mercy. The night air felt different when the last of the black SUVs rolled away. The small crowd lingered in the glow of the streetlights, their conversations low but charged. Some people looked relieved. Others looked unsettled, as if they had just woken from a long sleep and weren't sure what the new day would bring. Jordan stood at the edge of the lot, the hum of the engines fading into silence. She wasn't smiling. Undercover work wasn't about victory laps. It was about leaving a place better than you found it, even if the people there never knew the whole truth. Cedar Falls had been sick for a long time. Tonight was just the first dose of medicine. Mercer approached, holding out a small evidence bag, the button camera that had captured everything. "Hell of a job," he said quietly. The DOJ Civil Rights Division is going to have a field day with this footage. Jordan nodded, her gaze sweeping across the onlookers. She saw a teenage girl clutching her mother's hand, watching her with wide eyes. She saw an older man standing a little taller, as if a weight had been lifted. This was why she joined the Bureau. Not for the badge, not for the power, but to protect people who couldn't protect themselves from abuse of power, wrongful arrest, and systemic injustice. She turned toward Mercer. Make sure the locals get a chance to see the truth. Unedited. Every second. They will, he assured her. We're releasing the body cam footage and the warrant details to public. No spin, no burying it. As she walked back to her car, now cleared, every planted item removed, she thought about the irony. The same trunk they had stuffed with fake evidence was now empty, but it had carried the weight of weeks of surveillance, risk, and restraint. And it had carried her through the moment where revealing her identity wasn't just an option. It was necessary to stop them from hurting someone else. She slid into the driver's seat, the leather still warm from the day's heat. Her hands rested on the wheel for a moment, eyes on the road ahead. She knew there were other towns, other departments, other names on the Bureau's list. This wasn't the end. It was one chapter in a book that would never truly close. For Cedar Falls, the chapter would be remembered differently. Some would tell the story of the day the FBI came to town and dismantled a corrupt police ring. Others would remember it as the night a black woman pulled over for, fitting the description, turned out to be the one holding all the cards. Before she pulled away, she glanced at her reflection in the rear-view mirror. Calm, steady, ready. Justice isn't fast, she murmured to herself, the words for no one but her. But when it shows up loud. And with that, Jordan Hayes, undercover FBI agent, survivor of racial profiling and relentless advocate for accountability, drove into the darkness, leaving behind a town that would never again be so sure of who was really in control.